stop sharing the music here and share my slides instead. Sorry, Jonathan, I couldn't do the fade out that you like so much.
It's okay. It's okay.
All righty, guys. So we're getting started this morning. And as always, we want to hear about the good things going on in your lives and your business. And it could be either one, because as small business owners, they're one and the same. Life and business is so intertwined for you guys. So anybody have any wins that have been going on in this last week or so that you want to share? I'd love to hear them and celebrate.
Kind of interesting to throw out as a win, but I did just realize that my prices are way too low, so now we get to fix that.
Oh,
Yo, oh my.
how did you realize that, Josh? How did that come to understanding?
One day there was just no money in the bank, and I had to figure out why.
Okay.
We're not quite that bad, but we're just like going over P&Ls, like after we talked about P&Ls here, actually. Doing monthly reviews, I'm noticing that we're spending more lately than we're making, and the numbers don't seem too crazy for what I'm spending on parts and payroll. I don't feel like I'm out of control spending, so the only conclusion I could come to is I just need to charge more.
Yeah, huge. That's awesome. There's a couple of places to look when you see stuff like that. That's great. Brent, you got a win?
Yeah, through tracking our numbers, a win for us. Our numbers came back a couple weeks ago, but our first quarter, we're up 19% from last year. And if you would have asked me off of feelings, I would have told you that it was the worst quarter ever on the books, because it just felt like it. It felt that way, but the numbers don't lie. Tracking it showed that we're up 19%. And last year was a great year for us, which means this is even a better year. So
Wow.
That's awesome.
Come
I
on.
love to hear that.
thank you.
Being able to see through numbers. Yeah, that's huge, huge, huge. Yeah. And I'm glad that you even acknowledge or admit to yourself that if it was just going based off of feelings, I'd say right now feels slow, and it kind of
Well, it
sucks.
does with everything going on. It
Yeah.
felt like a rough January. Things just internally seem like a struggle, and it seems like you can manifest other things that are challenging into what's actually really happening in the numbers. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks for
Thank
sharing,
you.
Brent.
you're welcome.
All right. Anybody else? Any wins you want to share?
I'll share. We crushed our best month last month by like 40 grand, which is amazing.
Wow.
That is significant. Wow. That's awesome. How'd you do it, Gage?
It was just the right time for a lot of work, and we got into we did another win for us. We completed our first solar job, which was new to us and we're trying to get into. So between the solar job and all the right work coming in at the right time, we crushed it last month.
Nice.
Nice
Come
job.
on.
Woo!
Good
Love
job,
it.
Gabe.
Cool. All right. Any other wins you want to sneak them in? Feel free to interrupt me. One thing I'll say before we jump into the topic here, if you guys could help us out, help yourself out, and change your name to say something along the lines of what you do for your business, make sure it looks like that. All you got to do is click on your face and hit rename. And then that way we can put you in the right breakout rooms with similar industries whenever we get to that part of our call this morning. But yeah, if you have any other wins, feel free to interject or interrupt me as we get going here. But otherwise, I'll get us going. Okay, so what's on the agenda for today? We're talking about an office manager as an asset to your business. And something that I didn't share, and this is back in the wins, this guy right here is David Hardison with Clear Creek Plumbing and Gas. This guy I've been working with for about 2 years now. And one of the things that we talked about in our meeting last week was that he was sitting on the porch with his wife, drinking tea. And he said he didn't feel tired. And he had that tickling sensation of like, something's wrong. he told his wife that, and she said, it's because you're not used to having money. You're used to feeling broke, David. You're used to feeling broke and broke down at the end of the week. And they've been able to get to a spot with a lot of work. They had no office situation because David was the one that was managing all the calls, keeping track of where sales were, where leads were, and all that sort of stuff. And David knows himself, and I know David now, and he actually wasn't really managing those things because it was just hard to keep in with all the mess of everything else and running a business. And so we got started with having one office manager, I would say about a year and a half ago, who's been a tremendous asset to the team. And a lot of the growth that we've experienced in the past year and a half with her in the office has been because of her diligence and just being a really good fit for the office and in taking calls, but a lot through tracking and a lot of various other things that we'll talk about here in a little bit. So if you're here and you're thinking about, one, either I already have an office manager and I'm not experiencing that kind of a difference in my business, or two, I don't have an office manager and I feel like I'm in a situation like Brent was talking about. I'm going based off of feelings. I don't have anything to look at that gives me assurance of where I'm at. Then buckle up, because we're going to talk about some of that stuff today and try to make what already exists as your office, your back office, more effective, but also talk about why or how you can make the office manager position more of an asset to your business. So really valuable quote I'm going to start off with here is by Andrew Carnegie, very famous in the business owner and entrepreneurial world. He's got this quote where he said that no person will make a great business who wants to do it all himself or get all the credit. This is a really valuable quote for what we're talking about here, because you may not be thinking about it in this way. I think probably most of us are not thinking about it in the way of, well, I just want to handle all this stuff. That's probably not the case. What's more likely is you're thinking something along the lines of, well, if I don't do it, or I don't think I can find somebody that will be able to do it as well as me, or do it the way that I want to, or there's just too much going on for me to add this expense, or to think about this, or to try to train somebody up to do this position. That's going to keep you stuck. So the first thing I want to talk about here is just, when should I hire for this position? And Nicole had a really great talk on this a couple of weeks ago, so you may recognize some of the things that we're talking about here. But in getting an office manager, there's a couple of ways we can very quickly tell when you're ready to bring somebody onto that position. If you're losing calls because you simply can't respond fast enough, you're not able to follow up with leads, or like David, you know that you're never going to do tracking for yourself, or that stuff is just, it's too much for you to really handle. You're better at these other things in your business, then that may be the right time. If you're hitting your revenue goals, meaning you've got good cash flow with your team currently, but you can't grow any further because you're the end all be all. Everything has to pass through you. It may be time to bring somebody in the office. If your value's being damaged, or your branding, because you can't do it all, you may need more than just an office manager, but an office manager can be a part of that. Now, practically, functionally, financially, I want to give a kind of a rule of thumb, but this is not the end all be all. We would say that for most of the people that we work with, so service businesses and remodeling businesses, a good pivot or transition time of when you should have somebody in the office, whether that's you or a hired position, is when you're getting to the point where you have about 3 trucks or about 2 active crews. Again, this is not the end all be all. So don't hear this as, well, I'm at 2 trucks, but I have no idea what's going on in the office. Maybe it's not for me, and maybe it's not. Assess where you're at, assess your cash flow. If you can afford to have an office manager and you really think that there'd be an asset to your team, go for it. But this is kind of a good rule of thumb to give you an idea.
And one nuance that I just want to touch on here is the business is meant to serve you. And so maybe you're in the position where you're just a chuck in a truck. It's just you. You're the sole man of the company. And you would rather hire a technician to replace you in the field, and you step into that office management role and you build your crew. And then you get to the stage, like Arnold's Plumbing is a great example of this. He got to the stage where he had 4 trucks in the field. And at that point, he hired office manager, and now he just does the back end operational stuff. He's not in the field, he's not the office manager. And so this can be completely customized. The business is meant to serve you, but hiring for this position, establishing this position well, is always going to be an asset for your company when done correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely correct. Yeah, so in that
Another
transition, just,
thing
ooh,
I
yeah,
was
go
going
for
to
it.
add to, you said assess your cash flow. I just want to remind everybody, go into your group calls. There was a talk that we did on consulting your P&L. And then just as Bryce is going into this, like that is a good group call to refer back to. And then just looking at your numbers and book a laser call with your coach, because it can be done. Everything he's going to say today, like it can be done. And just looking at numbers, we will help you figure out when to do that and how to make that possible. You're not on your own having to like assess your cash flow yourself. I just wanted to add that.
Bryce, I promise we're going to let you rock and roll on this slideshow here, but we did just get a really good comment in the chat from Gabe with Gabe's Electrical. And he said, if your pricing is correct, it should cover any additional employees or costs. If not, your pricing needs adjustments. This is a really great
Fair
point
enough.
here where
Yeah.
you have to be paying attention to your margins. That's how you come up with your prices. You know, this should never be an expense. It should always be an asset. If it isn't, you need to get with your coach to figure out why it's costing you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Bryce, we'll let you run. We'll let you do it.
Finally, thank you. No, I love the extra insight, and it's all valuable stuff. So yeah, just like Nicole said, it's your business is built to serve you. Let it do that. If you're never going to fit this position yourself, understanding yourself, just like David did, hire somebody for it and stay in the field a little bit longer. They stayed in the field a little bit longer, but he's at the point now where he doesn't feel physically worn out because he's not in the field as much, because his business has grown to a point, his pricing is at the point where they can sustain having not one, but actually now 2 office managers that are booking all the calls and taking a lot of the intake and doing a lot more than just that, which we'll talk about in a second. But he's also doing, like what Nicole said for, I think you said Arnold's Plumbing, where he's doing more of the operations management. So it comes with time, but that's the next piece that I want to say here is give things a time and a place when you look to hire for this position, and just generally. This kind of rule of thumb, this 3 trucks or 2 crews thing is a good kind of mental space to give. But what I want to really, really emphasize here as we talk about all this is not to paint this as a catch-all, salvation solution here. Hiring an office manager is to enhance the growth that you're already experiencing, not to save or to be a thing that fixes all your problems. That's not what this is for. With that, an important thing to know is we want to onboard someone into a functioning system, not into chaos. If nothing is happening at all, you owe it to them and to yourself to create some sort of a system or some sort of a plan for how the office should run, and then let them enhance it. You're not going to be served, and neither is anybody that you're going to hire if you hire somebody to make the office for you, if you will, right? Give them a plan, create a plan. What is a script for them? Even if it's bad to start with something. Put together a script for inbound calls. Tell them or create a space or ask your coach to help you build a space for them to do some initial tracking, to put things into so that communication can happen through the team. Decide how you want communication to happen into the team. Onboard them into something that can function, not onboarding them and saying, thank goodness you're here, fix all our problems, please. We needed you for far too long. Try to, you owe it to them and to yourself to build more. And just do a little bit more prior planning. So again, give things a time and a place for when you look to hire this position. Okay. Unashamedly, I copied this slide in its entirety from Nicole because it was just so good from last time that she presented on this. But what is it that we need an office manager to do? What's going to really help us? So typical office manager duties, if you're curious about what that is, are as such. First thing that we always obviously have to think about is answering the phone and scheduling appointments. With that, they have to have a way to be able to schedule appointments. whether that's a Google Calendar, whether that's a CRM like House Call Pro or Service Titan or something, where they can schedule the appointments and you can see it, they can see it. Pencil and paper systems are bad. Don't do that anymore. Don't do day timers. Give them something to be able to do this with. So answering the phone, scheduling appointments, following up with leads, and sending out confirmations. These little additions in your sales process can make a huge difference. You are busy. If you can make space to follow up with leads, do it. If you can't, that's an addition that an office manager could do really well for you. Just getting consistent touch points every other day or twice a week, making sure that you're following up with those old leads. And sending out confirmations looks more prepared and put together. You distinguish yourself from any other contractors people are looking out for. If your sales process is somewhat lacking, this can really help. Filling out and updating tracking documents. I'm really so glad. It's very fortunate, Brent, that you shared your win at the beginning, because this matters so much to me, to be able to operate by facts and not by feelings. If you know that you will never track yourself, or you've struggled to, there's so much value for you in being able to see and update tracking. Also, they act as a gatekeeper. You as a business owner shouldn't be the very first person that anyone gets to call whenever you start to really grow and have a sizable business. They can act as a gatekeeper and get your phone to stop ringing as much. David Hardison, who I was telling you guys about, through a combination of things, mind you, but he was used to getting 65, 75 calls a day. A lot of that was internally from his team, which we solved through some team meeting situations, but also being able to make sure that he wasn't getting interrupted from his work. There's this idea in psychology, actually not idea, this fact in psychology, that multitasking is not a thing. Literally, our brains do not multitask. Whoever says that they're a good multitasker, they're a liar. No, but here's why. Whenever you change between one task to another, just like in driving a stick shift car, if you're changing gears, you engage the clutch, you're disengaging the drivetrain. There's that idle motion that happens. Every time you switch between tasks mentally, you're creating that idle time. So having somebody as a gatekeeper, keeping your phone from ringing, you're going to be more effective, more productive, more efficient with your time, as will everyone else on your team. Okay, I'm going to go through the rest of these a little bit faster, but managing third-party listing sites. So stuff like Google Local Services, filling in lead information, responding to reviews, things like that. Other marketing activities, updating your Google My Business listing, adding photos, making some posts, asking people for Google reviews. If your technicians are struggling to get reviews on the job site, having happy calls set up where they're following up to say, hey, how did the job go? Awesome. Hey, would you mind leaving us a review? And we've got scripts for a lot of this stuff, all of this stuff rather. Money making activities as well. We talked about Dream 100 last week, how to develop business to business relationships. That could be delegated to an office manager. Making Dream 100 calls, sending out emails, making the drop-offs. There's plenty of things that can be utilized for this position that will really enhance and advance your business. Collections tracking. This is huge. We've got plenty of calls on talks, group calls on this as well. Cash flow can be made really tight just by a lack of managing collections. If you're keeping it all in your head, you're not documenting it somewhere. You may or may not know how much is actually owed to you, and you may or may not be following up with consistency to actually receive that money at some point. Consistency makes a big difference. If you can't make that consistency happen by discipline or scheduling for yourself, have that happen through an office manager. Additionally, you can have them do some light bookkeeping. This is what Betka now does for Clear Creek. David Hardison, the guy I've been talking about a couple of times, she does some of the bookkeeping for their company. Before working with, as they started working with Redmond Growth, they had, I kid you not, a stack of paper and receipts in their office that was probably as tall as a human being. It was awful. They had no idea how much they were making each month. They had a rough idea, sure, because they could see their bank account, but they didn't really have any idea. So light bookkeeping is something that you can utilize an office manager for after trust has been built up and they're trained up on some other stuff. And this usually comes with a pay raise. So there's a lot that can be used. There's even more money making activities that make this more of an asset than it does an expense. Collecting customer information, making collections calls, price shopping materials, reviewing team invoices for accuracy and making sure that they're closing out those invoices, that the customer is actually receiving the bills. You know, sometimes cash flow issues that I run into with contractors that I'm working with is because they just haven't made the time to send the invoice yet. They did the work, but they haven't made the time to send the invoice. First off, try to collect that time in service. But secondly, you can have somebody help manage that. Whew. Okay. Try not to monologue too much. I saw a couple of comments in the chat. I haven't read them because I can't pull them up on my screen. Anything we need to talk about in the
Yeah.
main?
So the first question, Hawk, I'm not sure how many, Bryce, do you know how many trucks David has? You used him as an example. Do you know how many trucks David has in the field?
I believe that they're at 5 trucks right now.
And then Joshua Friddle, you asked how many phone calls one person making a day, and I was actually trying to type really quick to get you a response here, but I'll just answer it for the group. So a great way, there's really no like good answer to that. Like I don't have 50 calls, that's the answer. You know, it kind of depends on how long the conversations are going to be. Like if you're a typical service company, those conversations are going to be a little bit shorter. If you're a remodeler, those conversations might be a little bit longer. A good rule of thumb, what we'd always recommend is that you are tracking your call volume. So how many calls do they have coming in? You know, how many of them are actually like meaningful conversations, like not just like telemarketers are hanging up on, but actual legit conversations. And then I always like to add a tab on our lead tracker. You can put it in the KPIs, you can put it in the marketing tabs for how many calls are we missing, because that's going to be your biggest indicator on when you need to hire them some extra help. If we're missing a butt ton of calls, like I would say if you're missing more than like 8, 10, that's a great indicator it's time to get somebody else in there. And instead of having like 2 dispatchers, because that can be a little bit messy, maybe you have somebody who's answering the phone full time, that's really their sole duty. And then you have another person who's doing all of these other things. You know, they're the ones who are doing the marketing activities and following up with people and collections and stuff like that. And so that would be kind of the rule of thumb there. You want to always track, but if you're missing quite a few calls, it's a good indicator they need some help. As long as they are, you know, if you feel confident that they are working their full capacity. And then Josh, you asked what's a good pay range for this type of position. It's going to be pretty different depending on where you're at in the country, just because you know, cost of living and minimum wage is going to be different everywhere, but this is typically going to be a lower paying position. You know, we're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, an office manager at the very making $50 an hour. They're probably going to be closer to 12 or 13 to start. Once they start, if they ever get into something like bookkeeping for you, or if they, you know, start doing some of those activities, or if they are like a bookkeeper, have some qualifications, they might be making more than that. But typically this is going to be a lower paying position. If you want a clear answer, I would get with your coach so that we can, you know, kind of assess what area of the country you're in and what would be kind of standard there. All right, I think we're up to speed.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, and I would add to that last one a little bit too. A great way to assess that is to look at Indeed, see what other job postings there are for office managers that are similar to yours in your area, and you'll get a good understanding of what's competitive. So, all right, well, let's carry on here. This is great. Yeah, I'm glad we got some feedback and engagement. Great that you guys are asking questions. So here's the next piece that I want to get into here is, you know, we've talked about this before. Don't make the mistake of viewing this as an expense or as a saving grace. If it's currently strictly an expense for you, it's either that person is not the right fit, whoever you may have in that position already. Potentially we jumped the gun too early. We haven't given them the tools to succeed is often a common answer. But this is something that's really easy to fall into as well. There's this quote from Julia Restuin-Roitfield. I'm not sure where she's from, but she said, "My job description, it is many things. It is a whole universe created around the things that I like." I hate this quote, and I'll tell you why. Because this is someone who has said it's created around the things that I like. If they were working for somebody else, if they're working for you, that's not good. Oftentimes it's so easy. There's a lot of temptation to do this as a business owner, especially a small business owner. You care a lot about the people that are working with you, especially if they're loyal, if they've been with you for a long time. We can so often get into a space where we've created a position in our company around a person, rather than creating a position that serves and benefits the company. I want to let that sit for a second because it's really common. It's a hard conversation to have. It's one that I've started to have with a couple of people that I'm working with right now, actually. This is a very timely talk, but it's very easy to be in that position where, we've had this person for a while and they've told me either they don't like to do this thing or they're not good at this thing, or they just don't want to do that thing. And so I've accepted it and I've taken up the burden of responsibility elsewhere. I've picked up the slack. That is where we start to get into this office manager position is more of an expense than an asset. It's not really helping me because I'm still managing the hardest things rather than saying, these are your job responsibilities, do them. There's another quote that I have here that I like a little bit better. It's from Randy Moss. You may know who that is, but he says, do your job, be the best at whatever your job description is. That's the kind of mentality of the people we want in the positions that we're hiring. Hey, be the best at what your job description is. Create a job description for them that's clear and eloquent, or not eloquent, but clear and not exhaustive either. I can't think of the right word at the moment, but the slide that we had just before, there's job description, responsibilities there. Hire somebody to fit the position. Don't create the position to fit the person. Huge, huge thing. So we want to equip them, give them tools. This is, starting to get into the last bit here, and then we'll get into some breakout rooms. I don't know where to start, or I'm not utilizing this position to its full extent. What are the tools that we need to give or create or prepare for putting somebody in this position? 1, meetings. Structure, rhythm, communication within your business. If you guys are not meeting with your team, and this is true for the service side as well, or for your technical product and service delivery as well, you should be having a regular meeting with your team so that communication can happen. A lot of phone calls, a lot of got-a-minute meetings just create chaos and disorder and issues, I'll say. If you have a set meeting time, the things that you say resonate differently. Instead of being, hey, Eric, on this job, make sure that you do X, Y, Z. Your person is going to understand that to say, okay, on this job, I do X, Y, Z. But you meant for them to do it X, Y, Z every time on every job. If you say that in a meeting setting, you're having a regular touch point with your team, it resonates differently. Okay, this is our standard practice. This is how we operate as ABC company. So key tool for your office manager in particular is a daily meeting. You can make that 30 minutes to an hour. You can have an agenda for that meeting so you're covering fruitful stuff. You're not just talking about issues all the time or frustrations. You cover the things that need to be done. We've got plenty of group calls on how to run effective meetings as well. I said earlier, onboard them into a functioning system, not into chaos. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to them to build something if nothing exists. Don't expect someone to create the office position for you. Create some kind of a checklist. The slide we had a couple slides ago is a great starting point for what those office manager responsibilities are. You can fill in the details for how you want them specifically to do it. How do you want them to check the email? How often? How do you want them to notify you of things that need your attention? Creating more of an office checklist. And these are links as well, and we can share these in the breakout room. Creating a script. If their primary responsibility is taking inbound calls and you're really great at it right now, awesome. Document your best practice. Write out whatever it is you do to answer calls. Kind of give a pathway. It's not as complex as it seems, or ask your coach for some help on giving you a base template for a script and then start there and refine it. Even as you grow as a company, and consider call centers when we talk about this too, they're going to make sure that their best people on the phone are the people that everybody else is imitating. So if you're the best person on the phone, we want to make sure that your team is imitating it. The best way to do that is scripts and compatibly call recording. There's accountability, but there's also the ability to train people if you have call recording available. So Clarity is what we use. There's plenty of other voice over IP or just call recording things you can get set up on. It's a really valuable asset to be able to train that team and hold accountability and be able to verify, protect yourself from crazy customers, protect yourself also from potentially bad hires. You know, you can use this call recording to really protect the business and help grow that. And then this is related to the last thing, set training to be able to review calls and edit processes. All of your processes need to be documented. This is what we come back to so much in our meetings, in our conversations with all of you guys, small business owners. The most valuable thing that you can do is to get your brain on paper, get it out of your brain space and out of this tribal knowledge setting and put it into a spot that people can actually review it and use it. That's creating value. That's duplicating yourself. That's scaling beyond yourself. I'll talk about Clear Creek again with this. I mentioned it earlier. I was planning on mentioning it here. Long-term gains for Clear Creek Plumbing and Gas came through the documentation of systems for their office manager. First started by, and it worked decently fine for the time, but we had David's wife manage the phones for a little bit and try to do tracking. It didn't do super great. We had we had to document more processes. It was the first try. Second person in the office was his son's wife, Betka, and she has done an incredible job. And she's taken the systems that we initially made and definitely enhanced them and made them more valuable and effective. Had a couple of people that we tried to scale it to and getting that second office person. I think we went through 2 or 3 different people we tried to train up and just found that they were taking advantage, not answering the phones, kind of taking naps during the middle of the day. That just stuff was crazy. But we've now got Veronica in there as well. Because we have documented systems, we've been able to train people and figure out, okay, if you can't follow a system, we're not going to make this position fit for you. We need you to fit for this position. So again, it's all about these long-term gains, and these guys are doing really well now. David is not in the field all the time, not doing the back-breaking work as much. He feels weird being able to sit on his back porch drinking tea and not feel sore and tired. So long-term gains comes from equipping your team with tools. You owe it to them, and ultimately you owe it to yourself. Okay. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Get back here. Okay. Last slide here, guys, and we'll go into breakout rooms. Fundamentals. What do we need to know? Don't let logistics intimidate you if this is necessary for your growth in moving forward. If you are ultimately the bottleneck, don't let the logistics intimidate you. We talked about this a minute ago with the question, but what should I pay them? We can talk about that. Merit-based pay is always great, but you can also find competitive price by looking up simply on Indeed. What about remote versus in-person? What if I don't have an office? Most of us here, how many of us actually do have an office space? We'll do it this way. Yeah. So most of us here actually don't have an office space, but how many of us do have an office person? It's okay to do remote versus being in person. That's actually a benefit that makes your position more enticing. The stuff we talked about earlier with tools, scripts, call recording, accountability through tracking, all that stuff allows you to manage and hold people accountable without being a micromanager and having to worry so much about, holding the thought about having somebody that's not physically with you. And if you have that regular daily touch point, you're on the same page. How do I find this person? Oh boy, if you haven't before, if you post a job for an office manager, this is probably the quickest position you can hire because you will get the most applicants out of probably anything else you can post for. So many people apply to these positions, especially if they're remote. So don't worry about that part. We'll make it happen. It'll work. Okay. I know I kind of went through fast on some of that stuff. Maybe didn't give too much time to breathe and digest, but that's what the breakout rooms are for, is to digest some of this stuff and to think about practically what it needs to look like. So I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Rude here to send us into breakout rooms, unless anybody has burning questions. If you do, perfect opportunity to get to do
Nope.
that in the
Those
breakout
burning
rooms.
questions are for the breakout rooms. Let's do this. Everyone, you're gonna have a